Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri fantasyart.com. Just giving you guys a really quick preview of what I'm actually going to work on today. I'm actually drawing a dark elf, as you can see. That was just a quick snippet of what's going to be covered today. Another thing that's also actually going to be covered is a website I actually found online. A gentleman by the name of Jason actually does pinup art for cancer as a fundraising event. If you guys ever get a chance, do make sure you check out his site. He has really affordable prices, which I'm actually surprised on how low they are. Because if I was doing a commission, I would be charging a lot more. So his prices are really affordable. It's $5 for a black and white image. It's $10 for a colored image. The donations all go up for cancer research. And once the actual image is actually completed, he emails the person with a high quality version that doesn't have the watermark on it. So once you do get the piece, it's yours. It's yours to frame, print off, and to use. So yeah, no, this guy has really good art. If you guys ever get a chance, do check it out. His stuff is actually really cool. He draws both guys and girls, unlike me. I don't tend to draw girls too much. And like I said, it's for cancer research, so definitely check it out. It's called pinupsforcancer.blogspot.ca. I'm going to post the link to his site below, so make sure you check the description to find out the direct link to his site. And I'm also going to put maybe some other links there in the bottom from now on to anything I think might be useful to you guys as the viewer, or for obviously charity events like this. Might be also something I might start doing in the future. Now, back to the drawing. So this is me just roughing out the rough sketch. I had actually a completely different drawing for this character. However, and I had actually sketched out all the detail in it. I hadn't started painting it, but I was really close to that stage. But the pose wasn't interesting, so I actually decided to scrap that and go with this character instead, just because it had a more interesting pose to him, it was more dynamic, it had actually character to him, so I decided to go with this. I also wanted to experiment with adding some additional characters also into the mix. I haven't added too many characters within a piece, mainly because of time restrictions, so I did want to try it out for this piece here. So as you can see, I sketched out some characters as well. Now I just roughed out the shadows really quick, just to get a really quick idea of the lighting and where my light source was going to be. You see me do this a couple times. Once again, I'm working with just changing the opacity of the standard soft brush. So I'm not using any fancy brushes right now. Not until I'm actually done most of the detail work, where I might add a couple of different textures to the character. But in this stage, because I am more concerned about the structure, I am only using... There's no colors yet, it's just black and white. And I'm just using the default soft brush, just by changing the opacity. I have covered in the past that doing so, though, can be problematic if you have to do modifications to the character afterwards, because a significant portion of the character is transparent in certain areas, so that's something you have to watch out for if you use this technique. Now, normally you only have to worry about that if the majority or the more important portions of the character are actually being cut off by the crop marks. In this case, part of the sword will be cut off on both of them, so that could be an issue depending on what size I printed at. But in most cases, it should be actually pretty good. So I'm just doing some really quick outlines as I go, pumping out just some highlights here and there and some shadow to make sure that the details do read correctly in this character. Now, this was a dark elf, and I actually, because I haven't done any role playing, I actually had to talk to people who actually do this on a regular basis. So one of the individuals I talked to, by the name of Alex, actually requested that I actually draw a dark elf. So I decided to. Now, because I don't do role playing, he did mention that he does role playing and that there's different classes and all that. So I needed to find out more about this because if I was going to do a class type character, I needed to find out more of what was involved. Normally I don't play video games where you have very much choice in the characters. Batman Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, BioShock, those are games I normally play. So this is different from what I'm used to, just because I don't have that flexibility in customizing my character. Although, granted, I'm going to try to get Skyrim, hopefully, in the future. That might solve that issue. But because I had so much limited knowledge on this, I needed to find out more. So I did some research, and I found out what the general characteristics for these different classes and subgroups would be. And that information is very important, because if you are designing anything, you need to understand what are the core elements of that design. So in this case, the things that changed the most, because this is a class-driven theme, is that the armor design has to reflect that character's abilities, speed, agility, all that is factored in when I'm actually creating this design. So for this character, I did do the heavy body armor warrior type character. So they're generally not as fast as the berserker type characters that you would encounter in role-playing games, but they are fairly medium in speed, but they also have a great deal of armor, and they also have a great deal of strength within their fighting style. So for this reason, I geared most of the character's design being very heavily reinforced with armor, but also having two massive swords to show that the character does have that potential to have a very strong attack. So those are just a couple of elements that can actually affect my overall design when I'm actually designing a character. That's just a couple. Now, also, because this was a dark elf that I was designing, I also needed to find out what the proportions were generally for most of these characters. What I found out in my research and by talking to the gentleman is that the dark elves tend to have around human-like proportions, but because elves generally are more slender, they would be a little bit more slender than the average human. So I kept the proportions very similar to that of a human, but there is certain portions that are a little bit more slender because of this. Now, it is difficult to tell in certain areas because of the perspective also involved, but these are all things that did contribute to this character's design. So right now I'm just working on the swords, once again, because this character is supposed to have a lot of strength, brute force, but he's also supposed to be an elf. I couldn't make him overly large either. He did need to have somewhat elfin-like proportions to him. So I did still give him the large swords, which do reinforce the fact that he does have very powerful strikes. But I did also have to keep him somewhat small in comparison to his swords as well. So those were two main aspects that did affect the overall design for this character. Now what you just saw me do is I actually created the swords on a separate layer and then duplicated it just so that it would save me some time in the overall designing of the swords. Now, the only problem with doing that is I did have to change the lighting on the sword, so I tried a couple different techniques. What I actually did find worked the best is I inversed the colors on the sword and then highlighted the whole sword by using, I believe, the quick select. I held down the control key and then left click on the thumbnail, and that allowed me to select everything within that layer. And once I did that, then I just modified the lighting on the sword, but the general shape remained the same, which is what I was trying to do. So that's just a quick workaround for something like this. Once again, I'm very limited on time. I only have about 6 to 8 hours normally to do these pieces in conjunction with the editing of the video as well. Now, because the character had quite a bit of detail, I did have to make sure that, especially the characters that were closest to the character, actually had a similar amount of detail. Now, the closer the object is, the more detail it requires. So, the character right behind, well, the monster right behind this character doesn't quite have as much detail as the elf, the dark elf. However, it does still have quite a bit of detail. I'm actually gonna start working on another character in the foreground fairly soon. As you see me doing right now. And because this character is in the foreground, I have to add even more detail than what's in the elf character, because he is the closest to the viewer. The closer you get to the viewer, the more detail is required in order to make it look more believable, because the further away something is to, the less detail there is. So that's why you see the level of detail slowly decreasing the further away you get from the character. Now, another thing that was pointed out to me previously is that I don't have any sharp shadows, so I did want to experiment with that a bit in this piece. Generally, any cast shadows, so where the foot would be, where it's making direct contact to the ground, would actually have a very sharp edge closest to the object, and that would fade outwards the further it is away from the object. So I did try to include that, especially for the feet, since that helps ground the character. But because the arms were further away from the ground, unlike the feet, I made those more blurry in comparison. So that was just something I was trying to experiment with to see how it would affect my overall drawing. And I do have to admit, it made a huge difference. So I'm very thankful that somebody actually brought this to my attention, because I didn't realize I was doing that, unfortunately. Once again, I'm just reinforcing the shadows within the character. Make sure everything reads correctly. This drawing was actually not very long. It actually only took, I'd say, about 5 hours to do this whole piece, and that about another extra half hour with the drawing that I actually ended up not using for it. So it wasn't too long of a drawing. I think the part that takes the longest for me is actually doing the grayscale portion. And then adding the details in there. As you can see, I'm adding some rust and some textures to the character's armor to make sure it reads correctly. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you, and take care.